Welcome to Seymour from the Front Pew podcast, coming to you from the broadcast studio at Seymour First Baptist Church in Seymour, Tennessee, and featuring thoughts and discussions around loving God, loving others, making disciples, and living the life. I am your host, Tiger Brooks, and now on to the podcast. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for tuning into Seymour from the Front Pew podcast. We appreciate so much your support and your faithful listening. And we're certainly glad that you do that you do listen. Today, we're going to continue down the path of doing some biographical interviews with some of our staff folks. And you've heard from Pastor Corey, you've heard from Pastor Austin, Pastor Jason, and you've heard from me. And now you are going to hear from the elder statesman amongst the group, Pastor Bob Schultz, who serves as our senior adult pastor. And Bob, you have been serving officially in that capacity for how long now?
About 8 years.
8 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So 8 years, Bob has been serving as our senior adult pastor, having come into it after many, many years of faithful service in the kingdom. And we are going to explore that. And so, Bob, why don't you tell us just a little bit about how things began with your walk with the Lord? Just start from the beginning, wherever that beginning is.
Well, I guess that beginning with the Lord began in Unibaptist Church outside of Nashville. I was 9 years old. And when you say I was part of the junior department, that ages me, okay? I can't tell you who my regular teacher was, 9-year-old boys at that time, but Ms. Burkhart was a substitute teacher on that morning. And just something in the lesson got a hold of me. And I remember Ms. Burkhart dispatching one of the other boys, go get Brother LeMay, okay? And so I come to know the Lord. I will never forget that time. Some people have difficulty remembering, but I do not at all.
Right.
That was an earthquake moment for me.
Okay. And you say 9 years old?
9 years old.
Awesome. So what would you say if you had to describe, obviously at 9 years old, there is limited amount of life before Christ, so to speak. But could you remember any particular feeling or particular ways of behaving, or how did it make a difference in your life from that time moving forward?
Well, I mean, I can't tell you about hanging out at bars and that sort of thing, okay?
Yeah, right.
But, I realized there was a new direction for my life, that there was a new calling, and that I had to be more careful about what I did. In some cases, I overreacted because I remember I used to carry a Bible around the school all the time after that. Well, that probably wasn't the best thing to do, okay, looking back. My behavior should have underlined my new walk in Christ differently.
Right.
Okay. But I guess that was the biggest difference, is that I realized that this is a new life. Anything that might have gotten in my way before now had to be set aside.
So 9 years old, came to the faith. When did you move from Nashville? Remind me when you went from Middle Tennessee toward East Tennessee.
I lived in Nashville, or we, the family, lived in Nashville through the first half of my freshman year in high school.
Okay.
I attended 4 high schools. That didn't work well, okay? Dad had joined the Internal Revenue. He'd been teaching accounting at Peabody College. And we moved to Kingsport, where I went to an old rival of yours, Ketron High School.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. And I spent a half a year there, the last half of my freshman year. Then I come to Sevier. We moved to Sevier County and went to Sevier County High School my sophomore year. And for junior and senior, they had opened Seymour High School. So I was the second graduating class from Seymour.
Wow. And so, I mean, you were there literally as a junior. That's when it opened, and you were the first walk through the doors. That's very interesting. So, grew up, went through high school here in Sevier County, and went to Seymour. And when did you enlist into the Air Force?
Well, I was attending UT.
Okay.
I was not a good student. I don't know how to say that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. We love honesty here on the Seymour from the Front Pew podcast, and testify, brother.
I was not adequately motivated. Let's put it that way.
Oh, well, I can relate, honestly. I have somewhat of an educational odyssey myself. But yes, go right ahead.
So I was curious as to where I was in the draft. So I went up to Sevierville to the draft board and asked them. And they told me that I was so far back that they'd be calling women and children before they got to me. Okay?
Really?
That I was nowhere. They said, there's no way you're going to get drafted. Okay?
That's crazy.
Oh, apparently I was 364. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't even know what that means in draft terms, but because, I mean, you know, I'm obviously of an age that missed the draft. Obviously, that was long gone before I got to that 18 years old. But I recall hearing stories of, you know, you hear the draft dodgers and all these people who were very, very concerned that their number was going to be up. And I've never heard one that says, well, that it, you know, they didn't think I was ever going to be drafted, but that's interesting.
Well, while I was there, I run into G.E. Fletcher,
okay,
Air Force recruiter. And he and I had a long conversation. And I thought about that a while. And then I said, look, if you're not going to get serious about what you're doing at UT, you really need to go in the military.
Mm-hmm.
So I had other conversations with him. And so I decided I'm going to go in the Air Force.
Okay. And this was year what?
65, I guess.
Okay.
Something like that.
So things were rolling in Vietnam.
Oh, it was alive and well.
Oh, yeah. Hot and heavy.
So I enlisted in the Air Force. Looking back, it was probably one of the best decisions I made.
Mm-hmm.
Because I grew up primarily in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They changed a lot of attitudes, a lot of self-perceptions. I did not see myself well. But they had me, you know, competing for Airman of the Month on base several times, things like that. And all of a sudden, hey, you know, you can do this,
mm-hmm.
you know. So the Air Force was a great thing for me. I know there are people who are going to hear this and they're not going to like what I'm about to say,
mm-hmm.
but I really think the military is good for young men.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think it can help you reposition who you are.
Yeah.
So I have a soft spot for the military, and especially those that wear blue.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I went in the military, went in the Air Force. One of the quirks of the military, you take a test. It's supposed to decide what career field you should go into. Well, my highest score was in electronics. So they assigned me to Patrick Air Force Base, support base for Camp Kennedy, as a driver. Okay? So how that correlates, I'm just really not quite sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it was interesting down there. They tried to get me out of the transportation squadron into the Air Force Eastern Test Range Headquarters Squadron,
mm-hmm.
because I'd met people in Headquarters Squadron. And so my first sergeant squashed that with my permission, because he wanted me to stay in his squadron.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it's good to be wanted.
It is good to be wanted. So had he stayed alive, I probably would have spent 4 years at Patrick Air Force Base.
Right.
But he had a heart attack. And he was coming back, and as he was coming, he's just back from the hospital, and here I am out processing to go to Vietnam. And he just comes in, where are you going? And I told him, he says, he shook his head and walked off. There's nothing he could do then.
Right, yeah, too late.
And so anyway, I wound up in Tan Snoot Air Base outside of Saigon, probably outside of Cam Bay or Da Nang, probably the largest air base in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
I have often said that I learned a lot about myself in Vietnam, but sadly, a lot of people paid a terrible price for my education.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there. I was there for the first Tet Offensive, and to a lot of people that means nothing. But that was in '68 when the Viet Cong, North Vietnamese, decided they were going to create a general uprising in South Vietnam, at which time they would overthrow the government. Well, it didn't play out as they had hoped it would. But that meant you had incursions into the base. And on that base, on Tan Snoot Air Base, 12 airmen were killed.
Mm-hmm.
6 of them were killed by other airmen. Because you had a bunch of guys running around like drugstore cowboys where they had brought their own weapons over. And they didn't know how to use those things. And for that reason, the Air Force took up all personal firearms after that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, a couple of things that were interesting there. During the Tet Offensive, I had a non-combat AFSC.
Now, you might want to explain what that is for.
AFSC is your job code. It tells you what kind of job you do. Well, I was an administrative.
Yeah.
I wasn't loading munitions on aircraft or anything like that. So I got to pull KP. And on one occasion, they had sent me to a cooler behind the chow hall to get something out. And when I walked in the door of the cooler, I mean, this was a walk-in cooler, I got the surprise of my life. There was the usual perishables on one side, and on the other side were stacks of body bags. What it boiled down to is the mortuary coolers were full.
Yeah.
And they were having to farm body bags out to the chow hall coolers.
Wow.
A lot of men died during that time. But what I remember specifically on that occasion was I stepped in and I just froze when I realized what I was looking at. It wasn't fear. It was just an awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I remember standing there thinking, these folks in these bags now, just a day or two before, were making plans what they was going to do when they returned stateside. And they didn't have those plans anymore. So it really stirred in me a thought I've never given up.
Yeah.
That life is precious, and it's also uncertain, and you need to guard it while you have it.
It's a very sobering thing for a young man to have to face. Just, you already have stated that here you are, you're out in college, you're not setting the woods on fire in college, you find your way into the Air Force, you find your footing to a certain degree, you kind of figure out that, whatever you thought about yourself in college, not necessarily is the truth that is going to define who Bob is, because you walked into your own as an Air Force person, and so one person, as an airman, as a soldier, as a whatever you want to say,
Airman.
Okay, and I'll edit this. And but yet here you are in this moment. Obviously, I can't put myself in that situation. Obviously, when you're in the middle of something like what you're experiencing and what thousands and thousands of other people experienced, you are thinking and daydreaming and wondering about the future, and you're coming to the realization that here's some people that were doing the same thing and they have no more future. And that leaves you with some decisions and some self-awareness and self-inventory, I would imagine. So kind of walk us through, obviously, as we are going to unpack the rest of your life and what you do, you probably had a circuitous route to get to where you were going, but that did plant some thoughts in your head. And
absolutely.
And what were those?
Well, just the realization that my life is not my own.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first of all, God has a claim on me, and I need to be paying attention. It caused me to react to people very differently. Just another brief insight to Vietnam. I worked around Vietnamese civilians. And on one occasion, a young lady came up to me and said she had a question. And I said, sure, what's your question? She says, why are you different than other Americans? And that kind of floored me at first. And then I learned later, as I observed our behavior, I haven't met an American yet that wanted to be there, and we usually took it out on the Vietnamese.
Right.
Okay, that's what it come down to. But I always dealt with them cordially, try to be personable.
Yeah, you adopted the, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And but it just took me by surprise that I was seen as being different. Well, all of a sudden I'm reminded we're supposed to be different.
Mm-hmm.
When we took on the mantle of Christian, first of all, it made me a hypocrite because I'm not like Christ, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But when I took on that mantle, that should make me different.
Right.
I should be markedly. I would hope any of us who profess to be Christians would cause people to look at us and say, what makes you different?
Yeah.
And so that is how I've tried to live my life. Come back, got out of the Air Force, wound up working at a bank for about 15 years. I was known as a Christian in the bank, okay? There was a downsizing due to the acquisition of another bank. And I was the branch manager with the least time as a branch manager and under 40, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I was laid off. That brought me to Ferguson Enterprises. Ferguson Enterprises is the largest plumbing supply house in the country. I think they still hold that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
I was a controller credit manager. I had a rare opportunity there. I had a private office. Not many people, and a couple of people had private offices.
Yeah.
But I lived in such a way that everybody knew that I was a professing Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody also knew they could talk to me if they needed to. So it was not uncommon to have people knock on my door. And this could be maybe an operational problem, but it could also be a personal problem, or maybe someone was discussing the Bible and they'd be told, go talk to Bob.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
So you were the unofficial company chaplain.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I guess that's what it boils down to. And and so I would entertain these folks, and we would talk. When you got all the controllers together, we usually had an annual meeting. It was like 200 controllers from all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the occasion, a time or two, to actually open those sessions in prayer. So, I had developed a reputation in the company. Okay. I said all that to say this. If I were back at Ferguson now, I couldn't do that.
Right. Yeah.
Because of
the different world.
The cultural pressures that exist now. I couldn't be that open.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have been silenced pretty quickly.
Interesting.
But that's how much our culture has changed.
Right.
So anyway.
So let me catch back up on the other side of things and say, okay, so you've been married now at this point, being at Ferguson, where we are in your story. You've been married how long?
Judy and I have been married 53 years.
Okay. So at that point, we're talking 20 years?
To Ferguson?
Yeah, no. At that point, you'd been married. When you were at Ferguson, maybe even less than that, probably you've been married 10 or 15 years.
About 20, I guess.
Okay,
15
all right.
to 20.
All right. So kids already. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. And in church, what was your church life like? Were you here at Seymour already by then, or were you at another church before?
Well, I've been a couple of churches as we grew up.
Yeah.
Nashville, like say,
right.
Unibaptist back in Nashville, Bloomingdale Baptist in Kingsport.
Yeah.
And then we moved down here. And like I say, with the exception of a stint in the Air Force and briefly at Boyd's Creek Church, I've been a member of this church since I was a junior in high school.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I was just kind of wanted to lay that foundation too. So you've been here a long time. And so Ferguson lasted, I mean, you retired from Ferguson, right? After so many years.
I was there 21 years.
Okay. And talk about how this came on. Obviously, you were probably serving in a variety of capacities here at church. Were you teaching Sunday school back then as well already, or what all were you doing then?
Well, actually, I had felt a call to ministry when I was about 13 years old.
Okay.
So I had struggled with that.
Mm-hmm.
When I went in the Air Force, my last duty assignment was Seward Air Force Base outside of Smyrna, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And just outside the base gate was Stone River Baptist Church. J.B. Morris was the pastor then. Brother Morris made a considerable impact on me. The membership of the church was 100% Air Force.
Mm.
There was one civilian who was a member, but he worked on base.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you got to count him. He's Air Force.
Yeah.
So one day, Brother Morris comes to me and says, Bob, I got a class of 13-year-old boys that needs a teacher. And I want you to teach it.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, what would be a good religious thing to say at this point? And so I said, well, Brother Morris, I need to pray about that.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay. A week later, he comes back to me. And I thought, okay, he's not going to let up on this easily. And so I said, well, I need to pray some more. Okay. A week later, he's back again. And I thought, okay, you're going to have to say something because he's not going to let up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, Brother Morris, I just don't think I'm ready to teach. And he looked me straight in the face and he said, Bob, what's it going to take for you to be ready to teach? So I wound up teaching until I come out of the Air Force, a class of 12 and 13-year-old boys.
Yeah.
Their reputation preceded them because they had drawn on the classroom wall stick figures of their previous teachers. They took delight in who they ran off. They failed to take me in consideration because I didn't scare easily.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we actually become friends with the boys.
Sure, I bet.
Okay. But finally it was time for my enlistment to be over.
Yeah.
So that's why I left there and come back here. And that's, of course, starting the bank. Now, Judy and I are dating.
Yeah.
Actually, we were corresponding during Vietnam. And that fact that I felt a call to ministry was not news to Judy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Even when we were dating, that was a known fact. Okay. To the point, and we weren't married at this point, but we were someplace that was selling used books. They had a table of old books.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the books was entitled Prophecies Concerning East Tennessee. Well, it just struck my interest. So I picked it up and I was leafing through it. And here's a chapter that said the next Billy Graham was going to come from East Tennessee.
Okay.
And so this became a joke between Judy and I. Was I going to be the next Billy Graham? Okay. Just for the record, I've long since given up any notion that I will be the next Billy Graham. Okay?
Right.
But anyway.
The buses are no longer waiting.
So my point is, whether I belonged in ministry has never been an issue. And of course, when I come out of the Air Force, come back to this church, then I immediately started teaching all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have always taught, like I say, since the Air Force, I've always taught Sunday school class. Okay.
Right.
And it's been amazing. Like when Judy and I got married, we moved to Boyd's Creek. And I thought, well, we need to be part of a community church. That's the reason we went up there. It turned out that we decided that was not a good move. But even when I got up there, they all knew who I was.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I wound up just chairman of the deacons. I was put on the pulpit search committee.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I was in the middle of everything. You know?
Yeah.
And so what happened there is that, we called one gentleman to be pastor, but he was encouraged not to come. I'm just going to put it this way, okay? And so all of a sudden, the search committee is once again trying to find a pastor. So we was going to have a meeting to get together, first of all, to find an interim, because our interim had left. And the meeting was supposed to have been 2:00 Sunday afternoon. So I show up 2:00 this afternoon. I walked in the room. It was obvious they had already been meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I apologized. I said, I thought the meeting was 2. They said it is. But we were been meeting. We were decided that you are going to be the next interim.
Okay. All right.
So I spent about 6 months. And I referred to myself as an acting interim. I'm not ordained.
Yeah.
Okay. So I referred to myself as an acting interim.
Okay.
But shortly after that, we did call someone, and Judy and I decided to raise a family. We wanted back at First Seymour.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So let's jump to the point at which 7 years ago, I guess. I'm assuming it was Brother Bruce who maybe had broached the subject with you as far as coming on staff, or how did that whole thing transpire?
Well, actually, it goes back further than that. When I had my papers for retirement, it was an early out. I'm not in the Air Force anymore. Early retirement, okay?
Yes, yeah.
And you got a stack of papers, and the very first thing those papers said is, you are not to discuss this with anyone in management. So, of course, I'm sitting at my desk, and the regional manager comes in and knocks on my door. First words out of his mouth is, I know I'm not supposed to be talking to you about this, but I don't want you to take this. I want you here. And he asked me, he says, what have you been thinking about? Keep in mind, this man is a non-Christian. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I was thinking about, I just the day or two before was sitting at my desk at the house and was reading over this paperwork. And the Lord spoke to me very clearly, not audibly, but very clearly. Because any time before, when I was asked to do something beyond teach, basically, I would say, because I worked killer hours at first,
mm-hmm.
okay? My responsibility, I do I don't have time to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'm looking at the paperwork, the Lord says, what kind of excuse are you going to give me now?
Mm.
Okay. So when this regional manager asked me, what have you thought about? I said, I relayed that story to him, and he looked blank. He could not comprehend what I was talking about.
Right.
But I had made up my mind, this is going to give me an opportunity. It was shortly after coming out that actually Judy saw in the Mountain Press about seminary extension training at Harris Chalawi. So I went into that 4-year program. It was a great program.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it. Someone asked me one time, because it's 4 years, we met every Saturday. And someone asked me one time, well, don't you get up on Saturday morning and say, got to go to class?
Mm-hmm.
I had never thought about it. But then I realized I had never experienced
Never felt that. Yeah.
I was excited. I looked forward to going to class, know. And so anyway, I graduated. Well, the previous senior adult pastor, Ed Smith, had stepped down, and Bruce broached things. So, well, you've graduated,
Yeah.
Why don't you come on staff?
Yeah.
So that's how I got here.
So you've been serving in that capacity for 7 years, and in that time, and the things that I know about, I'm going to discuss, but I want you to fill in the gaps with the things that I don't know about. But I know it somewhere along the way in recent years, you really, I think, and I have, in conversation with you, I have seen that you have a heart for counseling with people. You've already talked about that. You love to meet people and try to be someone who is a conduit of, God's blessing in to speak to their situation. And Grief Share gave you that opportunity. And you've led Grief Share how long now?
I'm not sure. Several years, though.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's not like a couple of years.
Right. It's been a while.
It's been a while. And when I saw it and began to explore it, is there something needed here?
Mm-hmm.
So I went into it with some, okay, I don't know if this is a long run or not,
Mm-hmm.
In looking back, I am absolutely convinced that is a needed ministry.
Oh, absolutely.
There are people who are hurting.
Mm-hmm.
People hear about it different ways. Some see our sign out on the road. I had a couple join me this past Tuesday night. That's how one knew about it. One of the guys I have talked to in the farmer's market showed up Tuesday night.
Mm-hmm.
And because I guess that's another passion of mine. Is, as we say in Sevier County, shaken howdy. Okay.
Yeah, right.
And so I enjoy that, getting to know people. And we've had some pretty heart-to-heart conversations in the farmers market.
Yeah, and just for people's benefit, you've heard us talk about some of the community things that we do here at Seymour First Baptist Church. One is the fact that we do host the farmers market. Now, when I say that we host the farmers market, it literally means that we simply make our property available for them to meet. We don't have any purview over that. We don't have anything to do with the goings on of the farmers market itself, other than the fact that we certainly have thrown our property open to allow them to use this. And it has proven to be a very interesting symbiotic relationship. And you and Gene Williams and maybe others over the years have really taken it upon yourself to kind of be our hands and feet there. You throw up our shelter, our little tent that's got our logo on it, and you set up a table, and it's, kind of, what do you have? You even have a sign that says something about,
we lost the sign.
Oh, did you?
I lost the sign.
Yeah.
I had traded the car and
left the sign in.
Apparently left the sign in the car.
And the sign said,
it did say, Old Coots giving advice.
There you go.
Okay.
And so you make yourself available to the folks meandering through the farmers market, and you can strike up conversations about church, about life, about prayer, about somebody's dealing with grief. You can point them to the Grief Share thing. So it's just another avenue that you've taken upon yourself to do, which I respect greatly. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I want to just say this about Grief Share. You know, you've done it enough. I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, but so many times in church, and I think unfortunately even in evangelical churches and evangelical circles, maybe even to a greater degree, there's this stigma that we are not supposed to grieve. You know, we are not supposed to be hurt, that we are not supposed to have these feelings that, you know, God, you know, if you're dealing with suffering, then, you know, it's God's judgment on you. You know, if the Holy Spirit's living in your life like you're supposed to, it's just peaches and cream all the time.
Why do I not always show the joy of the Lord?
Yeah. Which is just ludicrous to think about. I mean, that's when the question arises, is Grief Share needed? It's almost laughable because absolutely it's needed. People need to have an outlet like that where they can come, they can hear how God's word relates to their grief and where he wants to meet them in their pain. And just to have that feeling of, hey, I'm not in this alone. I'm in here with a room full of people who kind of feel the same way that I feel. And so I'm just grateful that you do that. And
well, I find it interesting sometimes more ladies attend Grief Share than men, because somehow along the way we guys have developed this thing. I'm tough.
Yeah.
I don't need to sit around and cry with a bunch of people.
Right.
Just the other day I was talking to a gentleman and he said, I don't grieve. Okay. And in the same conversation, within a few sentences, he says, I'm lonely. I said, I think that's called grief, you know.
Yeah. Just by a different color, by a different definition, different stripe, same thing.
So, you know, you grieve over many things, okay? But certainly when you lose someone close to you, there is an emptiness, a profound emptiness that you have to deal with some way. And you're going to deal with it. You may deal with it well, or you may deal with it poorly.
Right.
So we hopefully encourage folks that you're not in this by yourself.
Yes.
The Lord is walking with you.
Yeah.
And you can manage this.
Real quickly, and we're kind of going to have to draw this to a conclusion, but I want to hit on the fact that you are our senior adult pastor, which means that you teach a class which is predominantly made up of senior adults as well, but you also have numerous activities, lunches, outings to where, we're, on the verge of heading up to Metcalf Bottoms here in the Great Smoky Mountains soon for another outing. Just talk a little bit about the opportunities that are available to people, senior adults, right here at Seymour First Baptist Church. This is your commercial opportunity, right?
This is my commercial. Okay, we do a number of things. Normally, at the third Thursday of each month, we have a luncheon. I try to bring in someone who entertains. I have discovered over the time that my folks do not want to be educated. They want to be entertained, okay? So, primarily entertainers. Occasionally I can slip in the county historian who can be entertaining while telling you about stories about history of Sevier County, okay? So things like that. But try to bring in different things. I have developed a liaison with the Sevier County Health Department. We're talking about a couple of things that probably will come up after the first of the year. I'm supposed to have a meeting with them on one concerning dealing with chronic illness. That will probably come up after the first of the year. They are very interested in working with us in reaching the community. The problem we have had is we have done matter of balance. The problem with that, it's a limited participation, and we always fill it up with church members before we get around to extending the invitation into the community. So, no, we try to do different things. How can we touch our senior adults and enrich their lives? Hopefully.
Right.
Whether it be physically or spiritually.
Yeah. And also, the thing that I've appreciated, it feels like I think we are going to be able to do this to a greater degree, and we're going to strive to be more purposeful in this. But not just have senior adult events for senior adults, but also have events and ways of weaving our senior adults into the other events of the church in volunteer capacities and leadership capacities, and building relationships with the generations after them and things like that. And so I think we both have ideas on maybe how we can maybe do that some more in the future. But our time is up for this podcast. Time flies when you're having fun. And I certainly appreciate the fact, number one, I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you do here for us, with us. I appreciate the wisdom that you bring to the table when we get together as pastors. And so, I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your stopping by the office and let's chit chat about certain things every now and again. But you are a light that God has used for many years here at Seymour First Baptist Church, and we appreciate you. And I just look forward to continuing to, however long this journey lasts until you have your early retirement from this position. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I hope not. I hope the next call up is the ultimate call up.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you, Bob. Thanks for all you do for the folks here at Seymour First and the surrounding community.
Well, the appreciation is mutual. Thank you for your graciously guiding me through this.
Amen. All right. Well, this has been Seymour from the Front Pew. And again, as we always say, if you have found any value in this, if it has encouraged you in any way, please continue to like and follow and subscribe and share this out. Maybe tell some folks, hey, have you been listening to the podcast? You might want to catch, I just heard a great podcast about Bob Schultz over there at Seymour First Baptist Church. You can inspire others to get on the bandwagon as well. Thanks again for listening to Seymour from the Front Pew. Thank you for listening to Seymour from the Front Pew. Our sole desire for this podcast is to glorify God by educating and encouraging His body. If you would like to learn more about anything you've heard today, feel free to reach out by email at staff@seymourfbc.org or by visiting our website at seymourfbc.org. If you're located near our community and do not have a church home, come worship with us at 10:15 a.m. on Sunday morning. Until then, we pray God's richest blessings on you and yours as you love God, love others, make disciples, and live the life.